Everybody, Mo here, and today I'm bringing you guys another video on Legends of Runeterra. Today we're gonna do things a little bit differently with the new season starting up. Like literally tomorrow, and a bunch of Hearthstone players coming over, and just newer players in general. Older LoR players are coming back, new Magic players, Hearthstone players, a bunch of players coming over to Legends of Runeterra. I wanted to put out this video that kind of compares the decks of Hearthstone to Legends of Runeterra, so that way if you're looking for something to start off with, or just so you can get an idea of how our archetypes work compared to your Hearthstone archetypes, you can have an idea of what maybe you want to play or get into. Best thing for me that I would recommend you is just like go watch a bunch of deck guides or go watch a bunch of videos on the different decks. Watch streamers. I'm a streamer, and for example, if you want to watch me, and see what decks we play and how we play the decks to see if any of them kind of look cool to you, and then you can grab those deck codes, import them, and then try them out yourselves. Especially if you have limited resources, if you're just starting LoR for the very first time. Granted, you get a bunch of resources really quickly, and I did just put out a video on how to get all of the resources in Legends of Runeterra the most efficiently way, for free. Then you might want to wait a couple days to see what it is you might actually enjoy and what decks end up being really good, and then you know how to spend your resources on that. But before we get into the actual video, I wanted to remind you guys that 68% of the people that watch my videos aren't actually subscribed to me. So if you could do me a huge favor, click that subscribe button. Like I said, we're going really hard this year. This into competitive seasons starting up tomorrow. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna have deck guides every week. Meta Mondays telling you what the most played decks are on Masters Ladder, what the best performing decks are on Masters Ladder. Every week I have the Sweaty Thursday, which kind of tells you what to play over the weekend. If maybe you work a 9-to-5 job, or you're just very busy throughout the actual week and you can't play Legends of Runeterra all day every single day, so you only have the weekends available, or just like a few times in the afternoon available, then Sweaty Thursday is going to be perfect for you because it kind of recaps the meta going into the weekend. So that way, you finally finish your 9-to-5 Monday through Friday job, you're ready for the weekend, now you're completely caught up on the meta, and you know what decks I would personally be playing for the weekend and all the weekend tournaments coming up. So that's it for the intro. Let's get into the actual decks. So the first deck we're going to get into, which, a little disclaimer here first and foremost, is I haven't actually played Hearthstone since like 2016. So it's been a couple years. I haven't played in like 7 years or so. I did come back to play a little bit of Imp Warlock, but that was it. I didn't really get too into the meta. I basically played Imp Warlock, almost hit Legend, and then went back to playing Legends of Runeterra. I kind of just play it during the dead seasons of LoR. So if some of these things aren't 100% accurate and 100% match up, that's fine. I did have a really good Hearthstone friend, or a friend that's really good at Hearthstone, explain to me, kind of like compare the two decks for me. And then I had him tell me what all the Hearthstone decks did. And then I went through and kind of took ideas and made decks in LoR that kind of match that same idea of what they did. And yeah, of course, they're not going to be one-to-one matches, and the heroes and classes versus our regions type thing isn't going to be a one-to-one match. So I'm just kind of giving you a general idea of like, oh, this deck kills a lot of units, or this deck generates a lot of tokens. This is kind of how you can do that in LoR, and then you come up with a similar deck to it. Because what I really like, if you want the most like accurate thing, I would just say like, oh, you want a control deck? Here are control decks in LoR, and they don't really translate one-to-one with what your control decks did, but these are our control decks. But that video is a lot less exciting, so I wanted to try and find decks that were pretty similar. So here are 5 decks in Hearthstone that translate over to Legends of Runeterra. So number 1 is we're going to go over the Blood Death Knight. From what I understand, is like the most popular deck in the game. Basically, it wasn't great into combo decks, which this deck isn't either. But it just had like a bunch of board wipe effects and kill unit effects, and from what I understand, it kind of just like won the game through your opponent not having cards anymore. So this is kind of what that deck did. So this is our control deck that's been popped up for the most, the longest time here, has been doing really well. So it's ramps into your late game really early, so it's kind of like Ramp Druid 2 if you like ramping. So you have this ramp spell that gets you empty mana gems. This one gets you an empty mana gem, and this one gets you an empty mana gem. So you have 9 out of your 40 cards, almost 25% of your deck is just straight up trying to ramp into the more expensive cards early. And then after that, literally every card in your deck just destroys your opponent's cards, or you have like one card that's trying to win you the game. So you have, Quietus kills cheap units. This kills cheap units. This kills all of the units that your opponent summoned this turn for 4 mana. These are stall tools. Frostbite mechanic just means your opponent's power, their units lose all their power. So if they summon like a 20/20 unit for 3 mana, you can just make it have 0 attack for that turn. Then you have, Vengeance. This kills anything. Your big units, the medium units, any type of threat, this kills it. If that stairs late game is wombo combos with a board wipe, which we'll get to here in a moment. Very nice is what wombo combos with If That Stairs. So If That Stairs essentially puts all of your opponent's units in a landmark. I forgot what they're called in Hearthstone, but they turn them into landmarks. They turn them into these frozen tombs, which typically just say in 2 turns they get all of their units back. So it's not a very good card on its own, because it just says, hey, in 2 turns your opponent gets all their units back, so you kind of spent 9 mana to stall for a turn. But this card for 8 mana summons you in 8/8 and then just kills all of the landmarks. So it just blows up all of these things that are holding your opponent's units. So it's essentially just a 2-card like one-sided board wipe. So you just go, oh, okay, turn 7 you can play this because you have spell mana in Legends of Runeterra, so you can play this earlier than turn 9. So you play this, you just get rid of all of your opponent's units, put them in these little landmarks, and then on your turn 8, the turn after that, you just immediately play If That Stairs, you blow up all those landmarks, and then boom, your opponent has no board anymore, and you still have an 8/8 in play. Which is good. Then you have She Who Wonders, which this obliterates all units, including your own, but you don't really have any, with power of 4 or less, in play or in player's hands. So if your opponent has a bunch of cards in play that are like kind of smaller, and they have a bunch of cards in their hand that are just cheap units waiting to refill, because you know that's how a lot of these decks beat control decks, is you go, oh, I'm gonna spend 9 mana to completely board wipe you, and then they go, okay, unit. Well, She Who Wonders just kills all the units in play, as well as obliterates all of the units in their hand that are 4 or less power. So if they want to refill, they have to play really big units. And a lot of our aggro decks just don't do that. They just don't have more than 4 power. So this card's also nicknamed She Who Wins, because a lot of times you play it and your opponent just runs out of cards. And then Feel the Rush. So this is only going to be your big banger win condition. Summons 2 different champions, and then it makes them 10/10. So what that does is it brings Tryndamere into play as a 10/10 Overwhelm unit, which Overwhelm in this game is, I guess you guys don't have Overwhelm in Hearthstone, because you can just attack directly. But Overwhelm just means if it gets blocked, all the excess damage rolls over. So you can't just block this with like a 1/1. If they block it with a 1/1, they take 9 Overwhelm damage type thing. And then Trundle, which Trundle also gains Overwhelm when he levels up. And then, so now you spend this many. You can do this on turn 9. You can do this as early as like turn 7. You just put 20 power of units into play with Overwhelm, attack your opponent, and then your final game ender is Atrocity, where you kill your own ally, and then you deal its damage, or you deal its power as damage to anything, which is usually going to be the opponent's face. So you can attack them with 20 Overwhelm damage. They usually take like 10 to 15. And then you just throw this unit, which will be a 10/10 at them normally, and then you just throw your 10/10 at your opponent's face, and then they die, because they can't usually do anything about it. Alright, so the next deck we're going to be talking about is Imp Warlock. So Imp Warlock is kind of like a Storm deck. So this was the one like LoR deck, or sorry, the one Hearthstone deck that I did play. So Imp Warlock is basically just make a bunch of little small dudes, and then you want to buff them up. And that's what Lulu Jinx does, is it spits out a bunch of really cheap units. Like here you have little 1/1s, little 1/1 elusive, so kind of like stealth, but always stealth. Like your opponent can't block them unless they also have the elusive unit, or elusive keyword. So you have like these elusive units, you just have like this like random little shitty 1-drop, this shitty little 1-drop, this like little 1-drop. None of these are particularly good. You play this like Flame Chompers, which if you discard it out of your hand, it costs 0 mana. So you can discard it with like Poro Cannon, boom, now you have a 0 mana, 0/2 Challenger in play. You have like Scrap Heap can discard it for 1 mana. Like, yeah, this card can discard it for 2 unit mana, and you get a unit in play now. And essentially, you just like play these little shitter units, and then you use Lulu as a way to buff one of your units into a 4/4. So support an ally grow to a 4/4 means if you attack with that unit on the right side of Lulu, you turn that unit into a 4/4. So this works really well with Flame Chompers. So Flame Chompers is a 0/2 Challenger unit. Challenger means you can choose what blocks it, and so you will swing. You make this into a 4/4, and now all of a sudden you have a 4/4 unit that can pull and choose exactly what it kills on turn 3, and on turn 3 I will let you know that is absolutely ridiculous. Like, your opponent can't play their Lulu, because if they play their big champion for 3 mana, it just dies for free to this, what was probably a 0 mana card anyways. Which is pretty silly. And then you have Sneezy Biggledust for your like mid to late game if you don't have Lulu, and it gets all allies +1/+1. Or if they were created cards, they get +2/+2. And so your created cards are going to be like, this is going to be a created 1/1. So really that turns into a 3/3. These are created because they were created by this Portal Cannon spell. So these will turn into 3/3 like unblockables. You have like any type of Mecha Yordle that you manifest off of this, or that you would manifest off of, hello, get me off here, please. Oh, my game's broken. Or that you would manifest off of like Scrap Heap. The Flame Chompers created by Boom Baboon, all those are created cards, get like super buffed by Sneezy Biggledust. So that's really cool. You get to buff up your like little dudes again. And then your late game is going to be your Jinx spell, or your Jinx champion, which once you empty your hand, because you're playing out a bunch of little shitty dudes, once you empty your hand, this card will draw you 2 cards every turn. Instead of just 1, you'll draw 2 cards, and then once you do empty your hand, so if you play both the cards in your hand, you get a 1 mana deal 4 to the opponent's face, and then deal 1 to all enemies. So it's like a swipe. So you get 1 mana swipe every time you discard your hand after you play leveled up Jinx, and that's kind of what carries you through that mid to late game. And then the other version of that was Cursed Warlock, which I understand. I didn't play too much of this version. I think it was just too expensive for my collection. But this was basically Imp Warlock, where you spam out a bunch of like little guys, but it has a little bit more longevity. So it kind of has like better burn tools and then controlled tools to like, give you the longevity. And that's what this version has. Is this version is not nearly as aggressive and swarmy as the one I just showed you, but it does still play a bunch of cheap units here. See, like all of your units are 1 and 2 drops, like 1 drop, 1 drop, 2 drop. Like you literally don't have anything that's not a 1 or 2 drop outside of this like late game plan. And then like this unit is 0 mana. So if you see this in a prediction, which is kind of like you're gonna look at 3 cards in your deck and then choose one of those cards to put on top of your deck. So you're like stacking your draws. If you do that and then you see this as one of your options, it just puts it into play. You just get a 0 mana 1/3 into play. This card has a similar thing where if you see it in one of your options to put on top, you just automatically draw it and it just automatically goes to your hand, which is really good. And then the reason this one has more longevity is because you want to predict a lot, is that mechanic that says, you pick among 3 cards to put on top of your deck. Is you do that a lot to find your champions. So you set up your draws consistently because you're consistently looking, throughout your whole deck and trying to set up these top decks. And you can also skip. So if you don't see a card that you like, you can just say, no, I don't want to put any of those on top. So you want to eventually put your champions on top. Echo is going to be the main star of the show here. And once he levels up, he puts this card into your deck, which if you don't play a lot of LoR, it might not make too much sense on why this is broken. If you play LoR, you'll understand why this is broken. But it revives all of your allies that died this turn, and then you get to attack a second time, which essentially just means you get to take an extra turn in Legends of Runeterra. Because the attack token is absolutely silly, and rally effects are really good. That's why almost every like rally effect that's good has been super nerfed to the ground. So like to put things into perspective, just a card that plain says rally costs 4 mana. And this card costs 3 mana, and not only rallies, but revives all dead allies. So if you attack all your units, and your opponent blocks and kills all of them and like trades away their board, so you guys trade boards, but then you play this, you just revive all of your units that died, just your units, and then you get to immediately attack again, with your opponent only getting 1 action, and that's really, really, really silly. On top of the fact that whenever leveled Echo attacks, he creates a 0 mana Time Trick in hand, and Time Trick just says draw a card. So you get to predict 3 cards, so you get to essentially like look at 3 top cards to put on top of your deck, and then you immediately draw that card. So that's a good way to help you find these chrono breaks, or find something that can also put in a bunch of work. And then you still have that Jinx top in to burn, and then you have Voices of the Risen, which is going to be more top in. This is if you've leveled a champion, all of your allies have +2 attack this turn. All of your allies just have +2 attack, period. So if you like level this Echo and your opponent goes, oh no, I have to remove that really quickly, they spend their resources killing Echo, you just play Voices of the Risen, and then now all of your little 1 drops, so you're like 1/3, you're 2/1, these turn into actual threats, because this is now a 3/3, a 4/1, a 4/1, and then a 4/3, and then the issue is your opponent can't trade, because even though it's a 4/1, you're like, oh, 4/1s aren't good, they just block it with the 1/1. they still have to be mindful of this, chrono break. So if you have this Voice of the Risen and then you swing with everything, and they trade their like mid-game units and stuff into these small units that aren't really small anymore because of Voices of the Risen, you just immediately play chrono break, get them all back, and then just swing again, and it's going to be really hard for your opponent to keep up. Next thing we're going to go over is, we'll go over the spell deck, because it's the weirdest one. So as far as mage goes, we don't actually have any like spell mage decks, because from what I understand, the big spell mage kind of just plays like you lose a lot of tempo early game to play really big spells early. So you're playing like 20 mana worth of spells pretty early on, and you're playing the really expensive spells like down cheated really early on like turn 6. And LoR doesn't really have that, because we don't really have these like super grande mucho huge spells in LoR, so there's not really much things to discount there. But what we do usually have for spell decks are just decks that kill you, or decks that copy and play a bunch of copies of spells. So Karma Ezreal is one example. Another one here is Seraphine, is the most recent example. So Seraphine is, once you level her up, whenever you play a new 2-cost or less spell, she just copies it and you get two targets of it. New just means a card you haven't played before. So let's say you've gone all game and you haven't played you haven't played a Rummage. Well, if you have a leveled Seraphine in play, and then you play Rummage for the first time after that, you essentially spend 2 mana and you discard 2 cards out of your hand to draw 4. So it's 2 mana, draw 4. This turns into 2 mana, draw 2. This turns into, assuming you can discount it, turns into 2 mana, deal 2. Or sorry, yeah, because you fully discount it. So this is 2 mana, deal 2 to all enemies. You play this card called Back Alley Bar, which makes all your spells even cheaper. So a lot of times Rummage is actually like 1 mana, draw 4, which is like Pot of Greed on steroids. You have 1 mana, deal 4 damage. You have, this turns into 2 mana, deal 4 damage to a target, stuff like that. 1 mana, deal 4 again. So your cheap spells just get absolutely crazy. This gets discounted to 0 mana often. So you can get like 0 mana, get 2 Harpoons, and then Harpoon can do 4 damage to the enemy Nexus and stuff. So like I said, we don't really have cheat out big spells. What we do have is just play a bunch of spells to kind of overwhelm your opponent. And also, while you're casting all these spells, Ezreal is going to burst speed, deal 2 damage to the opponent's face if you're targeting a unit. So like I said, if you do something like just like 1 mana Pokestick your opponent's unit, you're going to copy it, play 2 copies of Pokestick. That's going to be burst speed 4 damage if you have an Ezreal and Seraphine in play. So that's burst speed 20% of your opponent's total health. That's pretty good. And the last deck we're going to go over here is called Token Druid. So this deck's actually getting buffed with the new patch tomorrow, with the new competitive season coming out. So this deck creates a bunch of tokens. So Lucian, where's he at? So this guy's actually going to go to 1 mana. And it says if you've seen 4 allies died, then he levels up. And it says the first time you see an ally die, you rally, so you get to attack a second time. And then you play it with things like Emperor's Deus and Azir. And Dunekeeper, things that make what are called ephemeral units, or units that guarantee die after they strike. So that way you guarantee that the units that you're pairing him with die. And you have this card here, it makes it so your champion can't get hit. But yeah, so Emperor's Deus, what this card does, it says when allies attack, or really any ally attacks, you summon a Sand Soldier, which is just this 1/1 ephemeral unit. Again, ephemeral says it dies whenever it attacks, or at the end of the round. And then it says deal 1 to the enemy Nexus. So it's essentially just a little deal 2 damage to the enemy Nexus guy. Azir says the exact same thing as Emperor's Deus. It just says when allies attack, you summon Sand Soldiers. There's a scout keyword that says the first time you attack with only scouts, you get to attack again. So a lot of times you can play like Azir on turn 3. You play Grizzled Ranger on turn 4. Because he has scout, you can attack with just him. And then, that's going to create a Sand Soldier because you attacked, and then you get to attack a second time, and then it's going to create another Sand Soldier, and you just create a bunch of these Sand Soldier tokens and a bunch of, you basically just create a bunch of Sand Soldier tokens, and then because of that, your units will die. This also creates tokens whenever it dies, so you can equip this onto an ally. So you put this onto an ally. When that ally dies, it summons a 1/1 that can't block, but the 1/1 right here, whenever you equip it, it turns into a 2/2. So you just put this weapon back onto this guy, and now you have a 4/3. So you have like a 1 mana 4/3 that's gonna be another token. So it just creates a bunch of little like 1/1s and like little guys, and you have ways to buff those 1/1s up with things like the Darken, things like Domination. Whenever you summon a 1-cost ally, grant a +1/+0. All of your Sand Soldiers are 1-cost allies. All of your Bloodletter tokens are 1-cost allies. So it's just a nice way to make a bunch of small little tokens and then buff them up, and then your big reward is that you just get to take extra turns or take extra combat turns, and it gets really sealed really fast. This is one of my favorite decks of all time, and I'm really excited to try it out whenever the new patch goes through tomorrow and we get all of the buffs. So yeah, so that's gonna be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to comment down below. Let me know if there are any decks that I missed or any decks you think translate over from Hearthstone to LoR, so that way all of the Hearthstone players can go check the comments down below and see if anything interests them. I will be putting out another video on Wednesday of like 5 decks I'm super excited about with the new patch and all the new changes. So if you want to see that video, again, make sure to subscribe and let me know that you're excited for that. I want to see what I've been cooking in the lab for the new decks. Yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Link Discord, YouTube, Twitch, all that type of stuff down in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.